BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Phil Goodlad and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. It's the news, the views, the analysis. It's everything you need from our beautiful game. On Tuesday, the 28th of January, it's Up Helio Day back home in Shetland. What a feast of football we've got for you lined up today.
The knee-jerk reaction of Scottish football, the way that tends to go, is nobody cares that you find yourself in the top half of the table.
The Motherwell manager Stuart Kettlewell resigns, citing fan abuse for his decision. It's 1 in, 1 out at Celtic.
Happy, very happy. He had a good track record first time around, so no, we're glad to see him back.
Jota returns to Celtic Park from Rennes, where Kyogo departs for Rennes. And we take a deep dive into the Championship.
Oh, great strike. It's a free kick. It's a goal for Raith Rovers.
3 points looking safe here for Hamilton.
Hamilton host Raith Rovers this evening. We also have a semi-final tonight in Scottish football that comes in the Challenge Cup.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sport Scotland.
Great to have you along this morning, and great that we can speak for the next 20 minutes without mentioning Up Helio at all. It's the one day a year when Shetlanders are either involved in it or not. And if you're not, well, you don't want to spend your day speaking about it. Craig G. Telfer is with us, Stenhousemuir's #1 fan, and a view from the terrace's shining light. Craig, morning to you.
Morning, Phil. Great to see you.
And Moira Gordon is here, bringing suave sophistication and just general allurement to Scottish football's daily podcast. Moira, morning to you.
Good morning. That was some intro.
Well, it was, and it was completely off the top of my head. I think I've been drinking too much coffee this morning. Craig, I have got some fantastic chat for you about the wonderful initial that stands in the middle of your name. Because the last time you were on, we spoke about the other man, the broadcasting titan that is William G. Stewart, who used to present 15 to 1. And I have a friend who seemed to spend his childhood watching quiz shows, which comes in very handy for the pub quiz of a Sunday night when we were at uni, I can tell you. Do you know what the G stands for in William G. Stewart?
I don't. Please enlighten me.
Well, before I do, what does your G stand for again?
Gordon.
So William G. Stewart's G stood for Gladstone.
Right, okay.
William Gladstone Stewart.
Good, strong name.
Well, I'm sure it should have been like prime ministerial. Instead, he ended up presenting a daytime quiz programme on Channel 4. And the other important fact that I'm going to completely waste 20 seconds of this podcast on is the fact that you remember the voiceover on 15 to 1 when William G. Stewart was about to introduce people.
Moira's nodding, so you're probably best pitching this one to her.
Well, the voiceover was done by Laura G. Stewart, who was William G. Stewart's wife. My friend Mark tells me.
I wonder how she got that job.
Well, I wonder, and I'm sure that my friend will tell us because he's an aficionado of 15 to 1.
What did her G stand for?
I think Gladstone as well. I think, see, you've asked too many questions. Typical journalist, you've asked the questions that I can't answer. If you're listening back to this podcast, you can just press click forward 30 seconds and you will just skip all that. Listen, we're having a laugh about William G. Stewart. We need to speak about Stuart Kettlewell, and it's no laughing matter this morning. The Motherwell manager resigning, and part of the statement that Motherwell put out cites that the abuse that Kettlewell and his family have been facing in recent weeks was part of the decision to go. Craig, we're all football fans, but we all, I would like to think, know where the line is drawn. It appears that there are some that didn't know where that line is, and that's why Kettlewell is gone.
Yeah, very disappointing to see that Stuart Kettlewell resigned because of the abuse directed at him. His family no longer felt comfortable to go to the games to watch him. Not to say that what was going on with Stuart Kettlewell. I think that him leaving the club and him parting shot saying that I left because fans were abusing me, I think it perhaps overshadows the fact that the club were in a bit of a funk at the moment, and it feels like he was running out of road for a little bit. I mean, to the last two games, to be knocked out of the Scottish Cup by St Johnstone and then to play them again the following weekend and to lose 2 goals, I think it was the 86th and 88th minute, these are the kind of results that will really put fans' backs up. And yeah, there are perhaps people that overstep the mark there, but I do think that the recent results, the fact that the team just aren't playing particularly well at the moment. I was reading a statistic that they're one of the most passive sides in the Premiership. I think they see the ball about 37% of matches, which is by far the lowest statistic in the division. I think these are the sort of factors that that led to his resignment, and I think that his resignation and the abuse from fans is just perhaps what pushed him over the edge in that regard.
It's winless in the last 4, 1 win in 9, Moira, for Motherwell under Kettlewell. Interesting, Craig speaks about the statement that came out and the online abuse. And as a journalist, you will have been focused completely on that line from Motherwell's statement yesterday, when Kettlewell spoke to the club's hierarchy and said, look, one of the reasons is the online abuse. And that does dominate any mention of the manager resigning. When we speak about it, is yes, he's resigned, and this is what he says is a reason why.
It does. I mean, because it is something that I think has become more and more a feature in football. You know, there's always been abuse from the terracing, but we've always prided ourselves almost in that Scottish football fans have a bit of banter. You know, that there's a funny line there that cuts through the real personal, caustic, toxic way of, shouting at players and managers. And I think managers, now they can't escape it. It used to be it was a 90 minutes, you'd leave and that was it. But now you're getting it online, there's trolls, there's everything there. And Stuart Kettlewell says he doesn't read social media, but his family and his friends do. So they then report things back. It becomes very 24/7. You can't escape it. And I think there's more and more players and managers who are actually just getting fed up with it and actually thinking, you know what, we need to draw a line, because for our own mental health, for younger players' mental health, for our family. And I think they're just becoming more aware that it's not something they need to put up with. And yes, results weren't great. The style of play wasn't necessarily enthralling, but they were missing guys like Lennon Miller who bring some of that creativity and that, the beauty of the game to it. So you have to work within the confines of what you've got. And I think Stuart Kettlewell did that extremely well in terms of where he has them sitting in the league, given their budget, where they, get into Hampden, they have performed out with their budget. So I think fans sometimes need to realise that you can't have everything. It's almost like I want a good performance. I want beautiful football. I still want to be up there challenging in third place. It doesn't matter what your budget is. They have these expectations, and it's good to have ambition and expectations, but you also have to realise that someone, just because I work, you don't get, as my granny used to say. So there's a lot of things there, and I think the fact that it then tips over in the personal side of it, and yes, people say, well, you might be able to sack 10 away. He might have done, but for a manager to actually walk away from a pay packet, let's be honest, if he'd stayed and got sacked, he gets a payoff. You're walking away is resigning because it's got so much for your family and for yourself. That says something in itself,
But what does it say as well for headlines around Scottish football, which will be viewed both internally and external to the country? That this morning there's going to be people around the world that look at the headlines and say, well, a Scottish top flight manager says he's leaving because fans are giving him and his family too much stick. That's quite damning for our game, is it not?
I wouldn't say it's damaging for our game at all. I think that's just, as Moira pointed to, that's football everywhere. Football in England,
really,
we're just seeing
a battle-hardened manager saying he's having to leave because his family is getting abuse at games and now no longer want to come to the ground.
Well, I actually picked out a headline from March 2024 where Stuart Kettlewell said his father was no longer coming to watch Motherwell games because of VAR. So it certainly wasn't his father anyway who would have heard the abuse. But while I don't condone abuse, I don't think it's unique to the Scottish game. It's something that Moira's touched on there. I mean, we're seeing this stuff, like, I don't want to bring up English football, but with Michael Oliver, the referee who refereed the Arsenal game, gave a terrible red card to one of their players, and then he was experiencing abuse. I don't think it's the sort of thing that's going to put off players and managers from coming up here. I think that Kettlewell, I mean, always sort of nipping at officials. Like during the match, he was sent off against Rangers a couple of weeks ago. He's bemoaning them in post-match interviews. He can be quite nippy with journalists as well. I can't remember who it was, but he was quite terse in one of his post-match interviews again a couple of weeks ago. So I think he is quite an emotional guy, and I think he is perhaps more sensitive to these things than anyone else. So I would say I don't necessarily think it's a Scottish football problem. I think it's perhaps a problem with football in general. And I'm just sorry that he thought that the extent had crossed the line where he had to step away from Motherwell.
It's not new. It's not new. There's players, I mean, for years and years, families don't come to games. You know, some of them will come, some of them won't, because they find it really difficult. If that player tends to be the one that, you know, is the butt of the fans, you know, fury, then you'll find wives, girlfriends, kids who don't come along to games because that happens. I know at a certain extent, that's football. You're going to get criticism. The same as every single one of us in the public eye at times will get criticism. I'll put a report out, somebody won't like it, you get a bit of criticism. But if, as Craig says, some people are more sensitive to that than others. Some people want their families there, others don't mind if they're not coming because they're upset. So again, it's about an individual and how they process it or how they take that on board. And, you know, Stuart, unfortunately, and his family have found that it's too much. And that's one person too many still, you know, that to have that feeling. But it's not new, and it's not just Scottish, because again, we see all the footage coming from the Tottenham Leicester, and the players get absolute abuse going out to the point that Ange Postecoglou came back and confronted fans and was had to be hauled back up the tunnel. So again, it's not just confined to Scotland, but it's not pleasant.
And that's something else, Moira, as well. Like I'd look at the Motherwell results. Their last 4 matches were all away from home as well. So I wonder if they'd lost those 2 games to St Johnstone. If it had been at Fir Park, I think that the stick that Kettlewell and his players were seeing was a bit more acute. So the fact it was away from home, I know it's perhaps the more hardcore supporters that are going to the away games, but I think that not everyone's there to see it. So I did think that the timing of it, you know, off the back of 3 consecutive defeats, 2 against St Johnstone, I did think that was a bit strange.
Do you know, I would ask you finally before we move on whether this is going to make any difference, a top flight manager citing personal abuse aimed at him and his family for the reason for stepping down. But I think we all know that come the next game, that this will be forgotten about and football moves on. It's just, at the moment, I'm just struck by the fact that one of our top flight managers says he's having to go because the abuse aimed at his family. And I take your point, Moira, about being in the public eye, but, you know, to make that decision, I think it probably shows an element of just how fierce the criticism has been in the last week or two for Kettlewell. And I think regardless of whether you're a Motherwell fan or not, you've just got to have sympathy for a guy who's trying to look after his family.
The thing is, I'd always like to, you know, it is such a few, and I've written columns about this in the past, players taking, you know, an unreasonable amount of abuse at times, you know, where it becomes really personal, and everybody can critique a performance. That's totally within their right as a paying customer. But it's how you do it. You know, if you don't like something that you buy at the shop, you don't go in and scream like absolute dog's abuse at the shop assistant, you know, because you had a faulty pair of trousers that you bought, or, you know, that you just, it's about behaving in a certain degree of decorum. You know, you're never going to be like the most reasoned person at a football match. That's not going to happen. But
you're not emotionally invested in Marks and Spencers.
People that shout to remember what it'd be like if somebody came out in their place of work and screamed that abuse, where you're not in a position to shout back. If you're in the pub, you can answer back, you can defend yourself. If you're in your place of work, you have to take it to a certain degree. And I think it's unfair on some players and managers, the extent that some fans just keep pushing the boundaries. And as I see, it is extremely personal.
I just want to move this on quickly, Moira, from a journalistic point of view. Who will you be writing about in the coming days being linked with Motherwell, and who do you think may get it?
I think that's quite interesting because, you know, you go through phases where there's maybe not that many obvious candidates, people aren't quite ready, or there aren't a lot of experienced guys out of jobs. But I think at the moment there's quite a few candidates there. I mean, you know, you look at guys like Neil Lennon, who'll always be looking for a job back in Scotland, but you also look at somebody like Scott Brown, who's doing well in the Championship. There's always people around about, but Motherwell as well are quite good at looking, you know, just taking somebody from left field, and it could be a foreigner coming in, it could be somebody from out with the the little cluster of people that you look at, but there's a number of players, and I mean, even somebody like Callum Davis isn't coming up, but again, it goes to how much Motherwell fans want a certain style of football, and they'll be expecting to still stay the position they're in, but with better football, whoever comes in.
Big news yesterday from Celtic on the transfer front, both on the way in and on the way out. Jota returns. Craig Telfer, I thought the whole saying in football was never go back, and yet Jota's gone back. We hear Kieran Tierney could be coming back soon. I mean, the whole footballing world has turned upside down.
Just get the band back together. That's exactly what they're doing. Yeah, I think Jota's an absolutely smashing signing. I know that Kyogo going out, it's like replacing a Ferrari with a Lamborghini. It's an absolutely phenomenal sign. I think that Jota, certainly in the last 18 months or so since leaving Celtic, has been a bit of the wilderness. I don't think his move to Saudi Arabia worked out, and his move to Rennes certainly didn't work out. The fact he's only been there 6 months before coming back to Glasgow. But phenomenal player when he was playing for Celtic. The kind of player that fans like to watch, the sort of player that will take you to the edge of your seat, someone that can beat a man, someone that's really flamboyant, exuberant, expressive. And I think that what I liked most about Jota, he really looked like he was enjoying himself as well. Anytime he got in the ball, he looked like he was having a lot of fun. And I think the only issue that Celtic really have is like, where do you play him? Because you've got obviously Maeda on one side of the attacking three, Nicholas Kuhn on the other, guys who are both very, very good, and it's where he fits into this. But it's a very, very good problem for Brendan Rodgers to have.
What was it you said? Lamborghini, and what was the other one?
Ferrari.
I mean, the problem is that they've not chosen a replacement for one. It's like buying a motorbike to replace a car because surely they're going to have to take a front man to replace Kyogo, because they've replaced him with a winger, albeit a brilliant winger when he was here 18 months ago. But
I think that's one of the issues. I think that, and it'll be interesting to get Moira's thoughts on this. I think that the fact that Celtic are having to go out there to sign like their number one striker, it kind of doesn't say much for Adamida. I think Celtic really overpaid for him. I think they paid probably double actually what he was worth. I think there's perhaps a bit too much emotion involved, given that he scored the winning goal in the Scottish Cup final. And I don't think he's quite got into the groove as to what Celtic are looking to do. However, if they can go, they've shown in the past couple of, certainly the past couple of seasons, they're good at flipping players. I think they're a good stopping off point for players to come to. I think it'll be an attractive destination for guys working their way up, and they'll be able to sign someone, have them there for a couple of years, and then turn them over and sell them for big money. It's a great model for the club, and it's something that they've been doing very well.
Moira, does Celtic need to go out and get a number 9 before the transfer window shuts next week?
I think they'll definitely be trying to. I think it would be folly to let somebody like Kyogo go and not have somebody else waiting in the wings to come in, or not in the wings, but to go more up front. So I think that's something that they definitely are trying to do. And obviously, I mean, as Craig said, they've got a brilliant business model there in terms of bringing people in, flipping that money. The money they've made on Jota, so we bring in a player of Jota's quality back in, having sold them for 25 million, and then bringing them back in for a tiny, tiny percentage of that. That's cracking business, whichever way you look at it. And it's not like they haven't had people filling that void while he's been away for these 18 months, wee jolly. So he's coming back in, they've made money on that deal, and that money then goes towards trying to get a number 9, or, improving the quality that they can go to the market for. Because it's difficult in January to go and get a striker, that's certainly that isn't going to cost you a fortune. So they'll be having to spend some money to bring in whoever they bring in, and they are looking at options. And I think for their sake, they'll need to bring one in. Or I think fans eventually will be, as Craig says, wait a minute, we've got cracking players here, but who's actually getting us the goals? Who's the focal point? So I think they'll need to bring somebody in.
Finally, let's take a look down the leagues. We've got a semi-final tonight to look forward to as well in the Challenge Cup. Queen's Park against East Kilbride. Craig, I always feel disappointed in myself, in the BBC, and Scottish football journalism when we're on the morning of a semi-final in our beautiful game, and yet we're speaking about Celtic and Motherwell and
same as it ever
was. Yes. Who makes the final, Queen's Park or East Kilbride?
That's a really good question. I think I'm actually going to go along to this evening. It's only like 20 minutes down the road, so I think I'll head to Leicester to watch this. Queen's Park haven't been in particularly good form at the moment. They lost 2-1 to Greenock Morton at the weekend, and that was a Morton side. That was the first time they'd played in 2025. Their games had been called off for the last time they played was like the end of December. So they lost 2-1 to them, and they looked a wee bit like leaden-footed at times, and I think they've got problems scoring goals. Queen's Park as well, they've lost a couple of like big players. Dom Thomas has moved on to Derry City. Dane Murray, who was excelling at centre-back for them, has been recalled by Celtic to basically make up their homegrown quota for their Champions League games. And they haven't, I don't think they've adequately replaced them yet. They're coming up against an East Kilbride side as well, who they've had an absolutely sterling run in this Challenge Cup, because in the previous 3 rounds, they have beaten Cove Rangers, Airdrieonians and Ayr United. So that's 3 full-time teams. And Ayr United, when they played in that, I think that was live on BBC Alba, they were superb, East Kilbride, really, really good. And Ayr United are a better team than Queen's Park. So I think East Kilbride can do it and get to the final. I think it'll be a good game all the same. East Kilbride very principled in the way they want to play. Mick Kennedy, Simon Ferry have the team. They always want them to pass the ball, keep it on the deck, move it from the front. And it does have its flaws. Sometimes it doesn't work. But when it does, as it did against Ayr United, they were very, very good. So I'm looking forward to this one. I can't quite call it, but I quite fancy East Kilbride for it.
We also have Hamilton against Raith in the Championship. Raith finding their feet with new manager Barry Robson, Moira?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the thing is, they always had a decent enough squad there. It just wasn't quite clicking the way they weren't finding consistency or just finding the results that people knew they were probably capable of. But I think, to be fair, this Championship, teams will win 1 or 2 games and it suddenly changes the whole nature of that league. It looks like they're having a better performance or better run than maybe they are, because 2 games later they'll have a 3-game without a win. It's just such a competitive league at the moment. There's just so many teams that are there or thereabouts, and they have little spells where all you need is one injury to a key player that suddenly means that for a couple of games you're not getting the results you really got beforehand. So I think Raith are probably going to find a bit more stability than they've had this season. But I think it's such a competitive league that it's not like I think they're suddenly going to, an amazing run of 10 games unbeaten or anything like that. I just don't think you do that in that league. I think they've got strength to make up.
I guess it's hard to tell how they've done under Barry Robson, because they were beaten 3-0 by Ayr United, then they beat Falkirk in the Scottish Cup, then they lost to Falkirk the weekend. They were beaten 2-0 by them, and they were really poor against Falkirk. They had a shot off the line and Dylan Easton free kick hit the bar, but all the good stuff they did was just within set pieces. The rest of the time, Falkirk were by far and away the better side, and I think the scoreline actually flattered Raith Rovers there. So it's really hard to tell how they're doing under Barry Robson. But Hamilton, I watched the highlights for their game against Livingston, 3-0 to Livy. Livy cut them apart. It was like Hamilton always feel like lesser than the sum of their parts. I think they've got, on paper, it's a good group of players there, and you can see how the team's set up and balanced, but I just don't think that's really translated into the real stuff. And John Rankin doesn't seem to be the most popular person amongst the supporters. So I'll be, where's it, Aki's tonight? Score draw tonight. I'll sit right in the fence for that one. Go for a score draw.
A score draw. How brave of you to make that prediction. Listen, we're going to have to leave it there. Mr. G, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Craig Telfer. Moira Gordon, thank you for bringing an air of sophistication to events this morning. Listen, plenty of material for you at BBC Sounds, not least, of course, the new episodes. When they drop daily, you'll get them at BBC Sounds of the Scottish Football Podcast. If you don't want to make 3 or 4 clicks and then press play and listen to it the old-fashioned way, why don't you turn on your notifications, and every episode will be downloaded to your phone as soon as it drops. For now, Phil, I'm Phil Goodlad. Enjoy the beautiful game, and we'll speak again soon.
For everything you need to know about your team this season, download the BBC Sport app. All the latest news, goal updates, stats and scores, and insight and analysis. Just select your club to get the biggest stories and best content at your fingertips. What a result. Download the BBC Sport app for everything you need to know about your team this season.